Listeners who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, just visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. And welcome to you, the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We now present a reading of articles and features from our USA Today for Tuesday, December the 23rd of 2025. And your reader for this hour will be Jody. And I'm going to start you out right on my front page. My first article is about Christmas trees. Increasingly, a solitary tree at Christmas, that just won't do. From the sweet aroma of baked cookies to festive family gatherings, Sean Hundermark's mom, she always put the Merry in Christmas. When she died then 20 years ago, Sean dedicated his yearly celebration to her, turning on the Christmas lights right on her birthday in early December and then immersing himself in the familiar traditions. I try to do everything that she did when we were growing up. With one embellishment, though. While his family at the time only had one tree, he now has 15 to 12. He has 15 to 12 indoor trees and 3 of them on his porch. I always loved Christmas, Sean said, and I always said to myself, I want to have a tree in every room. And they have an excellent picture of him, and his room is just filled with Christmas trees and stars, and he's sitting on the couch. It's a beautiful Christmas picture. From Kim Kardashian to the crazy tree lady. For a growing number of households, one tree just isn't enough. They just keep accidentally, that's in quotes, accidentally acquiring more. We've accidentally got an 8-foot, a 7-foot, a 6-foot, a 5 feet 6 inches, 2 5-footers, and a few small ones, said one person on Facebook. I still think there's room for a few more. I have 13 trees this year, said another person. I lost count, said a third person. For some, this multi-tree phenomenon, it takes on the Rockefeller Center proportions. A Georgia woman, Shasta Rogers, she calls herself the crazy tree lady. She fills her home with dozens and dozens of trees. In December, a family in January set a new record. They had 621 decorated trees in one house. Multi-tree households are growing. Most people don't have the money, the space, or the time to create holiday cheer on such a scale. But multi-tree households are now becoming more common, with 20% of those displaying a Christmas tree this year planning on more than one tree. The National Tree Company reports the average household has 1.5 to 1.7 Christmas trees. At the heart of the holiday cheer, Christy Peterson says she always wants to be in the room with the Christmas tree, so she has 5 in her Orlando, Florida home. I've always thought that one tree, it just can't hold all my Christmas joy, she said. She works for an aviation company. Having extra Christmas trees, well, that makes it feel a little bit more like Christmas. At the heart of Christmas cheer, it's the tree. It's a temporary landmark of time that helps people make meaning by slowing attention, encouraging presence, and creating a psychological break from your everyday demands, says Pamela Rutledge, who's the director of the Media Psychology Research Center. A tree in every single room. Donna Coutil Ross, she runs a Cape Cod garden center with her brother. She's been bringing nature indoor every winter for just decades. We sell Christmas, says Ross, who's 51. I grew up selling trees, unloading trees, loving trees. Ross always had a Christmas tree in her own home went in her own home. Then, when her daughter was born 10 years ago, she started getting 2 trees. But as the family collected more ornaments, well, there weren't enough trees to hold them. So now Ross has 8 trees, including a 9-foot Fraser fir in the living room, a sports and leisure-themed tree in the 3-season porch, then a seashore-themed tree in her spare room, and a Grammys tree with ornaments from grandmothers on both sides. She has noticed that her customers in her Scenic Roots Garden Center in Sandwich, Massachusetts, they often pick up 2 or 3 trees. I just love Christmas, and I just love what the trees are with the ornaments on them, she said. They are your memories, and they are your family, and they are your joy. To me, they just fill your home with love. And now my next story is lengthy immigration detentions are increasing. A couple's happiness hangs on a woman's deportation. It was the Trump era international love story. A boy meets girl, the boy falls in love, and then the girl gets detained by ICE. But the detention of Lithuanian-born Tatjana Vesiokol is an unusual one, even in an era of increasingly strict immigration enforcement. She's now entering her 11th month in an immigration lockup. Al Dalasta, her American fiancé, just can't understand why. She has essentially lost a year of her life, Dalasta said of his partner. And she's falling apart in there. The day President Donald Trump took office, January 20th, he signed 7 executive orders that set the stage for a surge in immigration enforcement across the country. Vesiokol was among the first to be swept up in this mass deportation campaign. The Trump administration is now detaining more immigrants than at any time since World War II. Now, as of November 30th, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement reported a record 65,735 people in immigration detention. Now, provided with the details of her case, the Department of Homeland Security sent out a statement. The delay of her removal was because of the illegal alien's potential inclusion as a member of a class action lawsuit. DHS didn't name that lawsuit or respond to our USA Today's questions for clarification. Dalasta said Vesiokol was never even told that she was part of the lawsuit. Vesiokol's prolonged detention may also be a symptom of ICE working in overdrive, says Jessica Vaughn, who's the director of policy for the Center of Immigration Studies, which advocates for immigration restrictions. The cost of detention. The months have been very hard on both of them. Vesiokol, who's 38, struggles to keep her spirits up. She was a runner, and now she gets precious little time outside. Dalasta, who's 43, he battles anxiety, which has worsened with this detention period. He recently resigned from his job as a safety associate for a major home improvement chain. With no end in sight to his fiance's detention, Dalasta has tallied up the personal financial costs. Some $22,000 in fees to immigration attorneys, an additional $2,000 in commissary costs, $6,370 in phone calls to the detention center. It's his life savings. Hope and hobbyists. December 21 marked 180 days from the day of her final deportation order that took effect. It's also the day when the law cracks open a window to potential relief. Immigration attorneys say Vesiokol could now file what's known as a hobbyist petition. That's a formal legal request asking the court to review the legality of her detention. She doesn't have a lawyer, and they're both nearly out of money, but she has pleaded with her deportation officer to let her buy her own ticket home. I have a life out here. Vesiokol arrived in America from Moscow with $100 in her pocket and the knowledge that her father, who was a veteran of the Russia's armed forces and hated the U.S., would never forgive her. When I came here, my father found out and I was scared to go back, she said. She had grown up in Moscow with her father and his family and his Lithuanian mother. When she first met Dalasta for the first date, she asked him to meet her at a pub where she didn't think that she'd run into people she knew. But right away, friends all spotted me and said, "Hey girl, be careful out there. It's funny first date." Now they talk about 5 times a day on the pricey detention center's phone lines via 30 cents a minute video calls. Vesiokol has watched other immigrant women come and go, be released or deported. Most of the ones detained long-term with her are there, she says, because they are fighting to stay in the U.S. She isn't. Without knowing how much longer she'll be inside, how much longer before she sees Dalasta face to face, she holds on to an idea from her mother's Catholicism, that the seemingly endless detention, it's a penance. If that's the price I pay for being with the love of my life, she says, I can pay that price because I know after this, I'm going to be happy. And now here's our page 1 cover story. It's med schools aim to improve care. Families of patients who have special needs, they are struggling to find accommodating doctors. When Elizabeth Dalzell's daughter, Liesl, complained of severe pain in her left shoulder in June by using sign language, it began a nearly month-long odyssey through New Jersey's healthcare system before the young woman with multiple disabilities received the care she needed, a routine cortisone shot. Now, during that time, an urgent care provider balked at giving Liesl an x-ray because she moved around too much. Then an orthopedist asked Dalzell if her daughter would get all weirdo with him during an examination. And then a week had to pass before an anesthesiologist was available to put Liesl under so she could receive the shot without interfering. It took 3 weeks, and she was in so much pain, Dalzell said. It didn't have to be like that, but that's what we all face. Treating patients with intellectual and developmental disabilities, it's not easy. Parents and advocates say a large percentage of medical providers lack the training to appropriately treat patients with disabilities with care, dignity, and expertise to achieve the good outcomes. Educators at some of New Jersey's top medical schools say the disparities in care, they are significant, and they are now training the next generation of healthcare professionals with tools to narrow this gap. That is driving change at some hospital systems, like coordinating multiple procedures for a patient at the same time, so it lessens the stress and the highlighting at the top of their medical records the best way to interact with the patient who has the disabilities. In a wide range of interviews with families who have children with developmental disabilities, several common experiences and perspectives have emerged. First, adult medicine lags behind pediatrics in treating such patients, and emergency care often leads to some of the worst outcomes, including misdiagnosis. And then urgent care centers, they're a volume business where speed is their key. Properly diagnosing and communicating with someone with developmental disabilities, well, that takes too much time. Then also, providers don't spend enough time with patients with disabilities to better diagnose and treat whatever ailment is present in them. A growing awareness. New Jersey's medical schools are incorporating more real-life encounters in their curriculums. Now they're including pairing their students with patients who do have disabilities. These include veterans with amputated limbs, people with hearing and vision loss, children and adults with autism, patients with Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, and other intellectual and developmental disabilities. There is a growing awareness that this is a population that does require more knowledge than traditionally has been included in the healthcare curriculum, says Coffin, who's the project coordinator for Boggs Center on Disability and Human Development at Rutgers. Now, trying to change the system. Many parents want to have multiple exams or treatments done in the same visit for the child with disabilities to make that experience easier for them. When Liesl needed anesthesia to have a wisdom tooth removed, Dalzell also asked a gastroenterologist to write a prescription for an ultrasound on her daughter's abdomen because she was having pain. When the specialist refused, she pressed Liesl's primary care physician to write one, and then he did. Liesl sees a primary care doctor and 7 specialists regularly. Dalzell said she has cycled through at least 30 doctors in the past 10 years to find the right team. One primary care office often told Dalzell to take Liesl to an urgent care to treat run-of-the-mill ailments like a sore throat or an ear infection because they just couldn't allow the time her daughter needed. They're under the gun to see a patient every 15 minutes, and Liesl can't be seen for just 15 minutes, she said. So the experience is one of the reasons that Dalzell and others have petitioned Cooper to form an advisory board with families, doctors, department heads, and others to help the hospital, its outpatient centers, and its physicians' offices to change the way they treat patients like Liesl. Cooper now offers mobile care for checkups and lab work at a patient's home. Caregivers, they get a call a few days ahead of an appointment to see if special accommodations are needed, like a private waiting room. Cooper has also introduced a tab on its software system that gives a bulleted list of how best to interact with these particular patients who have disabilities. In one instance, a medical team was considering restraining a patient for resisting care when they learned that he always calms down when he just puts his hand in a basin of water. It worked, Dalzell said. Something as simple as that is the difference between someone getting a good outcome and not. And now let me remind you, you're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on our Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Our time is 12:13, and we are still in our opening section. And now my next article is Power is being restored in San Francisco. It's under the news heading. Thousands of San Francisco residents woke up on December 22nd without help from their plug-in alarm, but with expectations that their power would soon be on. About 10,000 residents remained without electricity as of 4 a.m. local time, December the 22nd, that was yesterday. Nearly 2 days after a fire caused a widespread blackout across the city, according to Pacific Gas and Electric. PG&E said it expected all service to be restored later that day as crews continued to work. At its peak, the outage affected about 130,000 customers after a fire at the PG&E electric facility, which was on December the 20th. PG&E said the outage was first reported at 10 a.m. local time December 20th, but then it became significant by 1 p.m. The damage from the fire in our substation, it was significant and extensive, and the repairs and safe restoration, it will be complex, the company has said. We recognize that the impact of this outage, and we apologize for the disruption and the frustration this has caused, especially during the holiday season, PG&E has said on its website. Waymo vehicles appeared to be impacted by the power outage, according to social media videos. Locals shared videos of self-driving cars stopped at intersections, causing jams throughout the city. Now, while service was temporarily interrupted, Waymo said in a statement to USA Today that service was returned to them late December the 21st. While the failure of utility infrastructure was significant, we are committed to ensuring our technology adjusts to traffic flow during such events, says Susan Pilion, a Waymo spokesperson. We are focused on rapidly integrating the lessons we have learned from this event. Now, Tesla CEO Elon Musk said his company's robo-taxis, they were unaffected by this outage. Longtime San Franciscans, they may be having a deja vu. In a post on X, San Francisco Supervisor Matt Dorsey said the same PG&E substation was involved in another major power outage back in 2003 when a fire at the facility plunged the city into darkness on the Saturday just before Christmas. And now my next article we have is the death penalty case worries disability rights groups. Justices are considering role of IQ tests in sentencing. Disability rights groups fear that a death penalty case before the Supreme Court could have implications for the intellectually disabled far beyond the criminal context. The justices are considering how to weigh multiple IQ scores when determining if a death row inmate's intellectual disability is severe enough that it would be cruel and unusual punishment to then execute him. But the court rules could potentially affect eligibility for government services for people with disabilities, like healthcare, education services, and income support, advocates do say. More than 1/5 of working-age recipients of the supplemental security income qualified because of an intellectual disability. Now, that's according to a 2017 report. It's just very critical that there be a universal definition when it comes to intellectual disability, said Shira Wachschlag, the general counsel for the ARC of the United States. Now, the ARC and other advocate groups, they worry that the court could move towards relying solely on IQ tests and not factoring in other information about someone's ability to navigate daily life and how early any problems have started. The Supreme Court rejected this approach in 2014, ruling that Florida could not use a single IQ test to decide an inmate's eligibility for the death penalty. Intellectual disability, it's a condition, not a number, the court said in a 5-4 opinion. Then in 2019, the court said Texas failed to account for possible error range in the IQ score, assuming that a score higher than 70 ruled out an intellectual disability. Now, in a pending case from Alabama, the court is considering what to do when most, but not all, a person's IQ scores are higher than 70 after they factor in this error range. Disability rights groups told the court in filings that when IQ scores are ambiguous or if their accuracy is doubted, then other evidence about how someone functions, that should be considered. They seem to be saying that you've got to look at a lot of different things in order to come to the truth of whether or not this person is actually intellectually disabled, she says. Alito floats concrete standards for death penalty cases. Yet, Justice Samuel Alito suggested that there would be greater consistency and predictability in death penalty cases if a defendant has to meet a concrete standard. Is that not one of the lodestars of this court's death penalty jurisprudence, as opposed to a situation where everything is up for grabs in every single case, Alito said? Death penalty cases are only a tiny fraction of the universe of intellectual disability assessments. Now, that's according to the disability rights groups. Because people who have intellectual disabilities, they generally need ongoing support throughout their lives. A clinical diagnosis can help them get special education, home and community-based services, and then other help. Wachschlag, general counsel for the ARC, said that the High Court has resisted past efforts by states to change its approach to intellectual disability assessment. But if the court reverses course, she says, those decisions have implications in terms of how future courts in other cases and how agencies in general define the term. It's very dangerous, Wachschlag said, to veer away from the clinical definition. And now we're going to talk about J.D. Vance. Vance rallies support at America Fest event. Vice President J.D. Vance said on the final day of Turning Point's sold-out conference in Arizona that he would pick up conservative activist Charlie Kirk's mantle. Thousands of conservatives gathered at the Phoenix Convention Center in downtown Phoenix for Turning Point's annual America Fest conference. Now, it's a packed event that featured rapper Nicki Minaj and a call-in from President Donald Trump. Recently endorsed by Kirk's widow for a possible 2028 presidential run, Vance delivered a campaign-style speech December 21st to an audience of about 30,000. If you miss Charlie Kirk, do you promise to fight for what he died for? Do you promise to take the country back from the people who took his life? The vice president had said. My friends, commit to these things, and then I promise you victory. Kirk was co-founder of Turning Point USA. Now, that's a massive political group based in Arizona. He was credited with boosting turnout for Trump and Vance for the 24 election and reached millions through his podcast and his viral debate clips online. He was then assassinated at a Turning Point event on the Utah Valley University campus back on September 10th. Tyler Robinson, who's 22, has been charged with Kirk's murder and made his first in-person court appearance in December. Trump, who headlined America First last year, called into the conference during a speech by his son, Donald Trump Jr. Nobody did more for me than Charlie, the president said, as Donald Trump Jr. held the phone right up to the microphone. The final day of America Fest was also a preview of a presidential battle to come as Vance and Minaj threw punches at possible Democratic contenders, which were California Governor Gavin Newsom and then former Vice President Kamala Harris. In his speech, Vance promoted the accomplishments of the Trump administration and slammed the Democrats on issues like Christianity, transgender rights, the economy, and free speech. He also seemed to wink at a 2028 campaign. We're going to kick their butt next November in the 2026 midterm elections, Vance said. Turning Point CEO Erica Kirk has pledged the organization's support for Vance if he does run for president in 28, saying it was the plan of her husband. She welcomed the vice president on stage, and the two of them shared a hug while pyrotechnics blazed out. Then surprise guest Nicki Minaj took the stage to her hit Super Bass, where Erica Kirk interviewed her about supporting the Trump administration and her activism on behalf of persecuted Christians in Nigeria. Minaj said she wants her legacy to be that people know it's okay to change your mind. Then at one point, Minaj mistakenly referred to Vance as an assassin. Dear young men, you have amazing role models like our handsome, dashing president, and you have an amazing role model like the assassin J.D. Vance, our vice president. And when I say that, oops, she paused and covered her mouth. The flub came as Candace Owens, who's a right-wing podcaster and a former Turning Point contributor who spread conspiracy theories about Kirk's murder. Owens has claimed the top Turning Point leaders were involved in that killing. Now, Vance has also sought to tamp down on the conspiracies in his remarks, telling the crowd that he researched them to make sense of Kirk's death, but eventually he accepted reality. Susie Nitsky, 57, of Waukesha, Wisconsin, said she is 100% behind Vance for the president in 28. We love him as a person. His humor is very close to Trump's. I think it's just great. I think he's going to do a great job as president. Judah Westdorp and Ian Westdorp, they're teenagers from Fort Collins, Colorado. They said that they would absolutely support Vance in 3 years. I love J.D. Vance, honestly, Judah said. I like him even more than President Donald Trump. And now my next article, it's on the back page of our front section. It is Trump says estimated White House ballroom cost has doubled to $400 million. Now they have a little color picture. You can see the American flag on the pole. That's in the foreground. And then you can see a demolition area where there's all just crushed up debris right next to a portion of the White House, and it's gated off. And it reads, the demolition of the east wing of the White House, that's the location of President Trump's proposed ballroom. It's seen from an elevated position on the north side of the White House, and this picture was taken in Washington, D.C. on October the 23rd. So here's our article. President Donald Trump said the price of his new White House ballroom has risen again to $400 million. Now that's double the initial estimate as construction continues despite a court fight aiming to block this project. Trump's earlier estimates for the ballroom, they began at $200 million when it was announced back in July. Then it rose to $250 million in September, then $300 million in October. The ballroom will be financed by private donations, Trump has said. We're donating a $400 million ballroom, and we got sued not to build it, Trump said. I think I'll do it for less, but it is $400. I think I should do it for less. I will do it for less, but just in case, I do say $400. Otherwise, if I say $3 over, the press will say it costs more. I build under budget and ahead of schedule, Trump says. The rising cost estimates, they come after Trump has ridiculed others for the cost of the other construction projects. He has singled out Barack Obama's presidential library and the renovation of the Federal Reserve headquarters. President Obama, and if he wanted to help, I'd give him help because I'm a really good builder and I build on time and on budget. He's building his library in Chicago, and it's a disaster, Trump told reporters back in the Oval Office on May 6th. The judge refuses to block this project. Trump's latest cost estimate, it came at a Hanukkah reception at the White House. Now, it was the same day that the U.S. District Judge Richard Leon said he would probably not block the project while it is litigated. The National Trust for Historic Preservation argued in its lawsuit that Trump and the federal agencies demolished the East Wing and began this 90,000 square foot ballroom project without legally required reviews or approvals. Yet, Leon said the preservation group has not shown that letting the project proceed for now would cause irreparable harm. Leon has warned the government to limit construction to below-ground work not tied to a specific future design. Now, another hearing is expected in January. Trump didn't want to be held up. We're going to do something that is really spectacular, Trump said at that Hanukkah reception. We didn't want to be held up and then be delayed. Attorney General Pam Bondi said in a social media post that the project was totally lawful. And let me remind you that you're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on our Niagara Frontier radio reading service. My time is now 12:27, and I'm going to take you over to our money section. First up, we're going to talk about UPS. UPS faces wages lawsuit, accused of wage theft from its seasonal workers. The Atlanta-based United Parcel Service, that's UPS, they have been accused of shortchanging its seasonal workers by requiring off-the-clock labor and failing to count all their hours worked, this lawsuit has said. The suit, it's filed in New York by Attorney General Letitia James on December 15th, alleges that the company intentionally manipulated timekeeping systems to reduce the total number of paid hours for holiday workers and seasonal employees and then commit wage theft. UPS's seasonal employees work brutal hours in the cold to deliver holiday packages to families across the country, James said. Instead of compensating these workers fairly for their labor, UPS has played the Grinch. So, what does this lawsuit say? The 21-page complaint says, during the peak delivery system from October to January, UPS, they hire thousands of temporary workers, including across 55 facilities in the state of New York. An investigation into the wages for these workers, that was opened back in 2023 when Teamsters Local 804, that's a labor union, reported non-payment issues. James accuses the company of not accurately keeping records of when seasonal workers start their shifts. In some cases, workers waited in the field to clock in or at their warehouse for hours while their trucks were being loaded, it says. And the lawsuit also says that workers continue to complete work for the company even after they have clocked out. UPS tells some workers in the field to return work-related items to UPS facilities after they're already clocked out for the day. Some workers are even asked to work for hours off the clock in the evening, this lawsuit says. Now, this extends to other aspects of the job that are necessary for their employment, but may not actually be time spent delivering packages. The lawsuit says workers have not been paid for the time they spend watching training videos, traveling to their meetup points, doing work duties during their lunchtimes, and more. The issue is systemic, James says, with the lawsuit saying that UPS even edits timekeeping to reduce compensable hours. UPS responds to this wage theft allegations. Attorney General James argues that UPS's systematic undercounting of hours and the resulting underpayment of millions of dollars to seasonal workers constitutes clear violations of New York labor law, including the state's minimum wage, promised wage, overtime wage, wage statement, and record-keeping requirements according to the release. Now, the lawsuit also alleges that UPS's actions violate the Federal Fair Labor Standards Act. In a statement to the Associated Press, UPS responded to these allegations and said the company takes all accusations of wrongdoing seriously and it denies these unfounded allegations of intentionally underpaying UPS employees. We offer industry-leading pay and benefits to our more than 26,000 employees in New York, and we remain committed to following all applicable laws, the company said. UPS moves its headquarters to Atlanta. UPS moved its corporate headquarters to Atlanta back in 1994 in Sandy Springs, and it operates as the largest package delivery company in the world. The company brings in approximately $90 billion annually and employs 500,000 people around the world. Now, that's according to the Attorney General's office. And let's continue in our money section. Next up, we have white men are urged to file job discrimination claims, it says. EEOC moves to enforce White House priorities. The federal agency that fights workplace discrimination is calling on white men to come forward with bias allegations. Are you a white male who has experienced discrimination at work based on your race or sex? You may have a claim to recover money under the federal civil rights laws. An Equal Employment Opportunity Commission Chair Andrea Lucas said on social media platform X. The EEOC is committed to identifying, attacking, and eliminating all race and sex discrimination, including against white male employees and applicants. The social media call to action is the latest escalation in the EEOC's efforts to identify discrimination claims, in line with Trump's administration's view that unlawful and woke diversity, equality, and inclusion practices permeates the American workplaces and are not balancing historic inequities, but they're creating new ones. This week, Vice President J.D. Vance described the DEI as a delicate program of discrimination primarily against white men. He also promoted an online essay claiming the DEI policies ruined the career prospects of some white male millennials. Responding to the article, Lucas tweeted, "This is a story chock full of unlawful discrimination." Reverse discrimination rise? Though white workers do account for about 2/3 of the U.S. workforce, their discrimination claims make up only about 10% of race-based claims. Now, that's according to data USA Today has obtained. This week, a money manager at Carl Icahn's investment firm sued Bausch & Lomb Corporation, his employer, alleging that he was denied a board seat because he's a white male, the latest in a series of lawsuits alleging reverse discrimination. DEI fights job bias, the advocates say. Diversity advocates said the comments from the Trump administration deliberately distort the purpose of DEI. In my view, it's a set of practices aimed at removing bias to create a fair and level playing field so that people of all identities and backgrounds have equal opportunity at achieving success, says David Glasgow. Now, he's an executive director at the Meltzer Center for Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging at NYU School of Law, and he's also the author of How Equality Wins, a New Vision for an Inclusive America. Trump takes on the DEI over anti-white racism. That's in quotes, anti-white. Now, on the campaign trail, Donald Trump campaigned against DEI for creating an anti-white feeling. And on his first day back in the White House, he moved to wipe out such initiatives, including purging DEI from the federal government and the military, threatening to strip billions of dollars in federal funding and grants from universities, and then pressuring major corporations to roll back programs or risk losing their federal contacts. The broadside rippled across corporate America as companies accelerated efforts to scale back or scrap DEI programs that could put them in the president's crosshairs. Now, the rollbacks had a direct impact on the careers of Black Americans and the diversity of executive suites inside the largest companies, a USA Today analysis showed. I have to say, it's a bit hard for me to look at the state of the nation. White households with 9 to 10 times the wealth of Black households, white men comprising 74% of Fortune 50 CEOs, white people being 90% of law firm equity partners, Congress being 72% male and white, and think that white men are at a systemic disadvantage in our society, Glasgow has said. Now, the most recent USA Today data shows that Black Americans are outnumbered 12 to 1 by white people in executive roles. At the same time, white men are making strides in the corporate boardroom, eroding gains that were made by women and people of color. And now here's our money section cover story. It's about donations. Donations are changing. Biggest changes to the tax rules in nearly a decade. And they have a kind of a cartoon drawing where you can see a giving box, like a donation box. You can see it's clear. You can see dollars and coins. And then there's hands of all different nationalities dropping coins and money into the box, making their donations. If you're concerned about taxes, you probably want to skip that year-end cash donation. Tax laws, they are changing, and timing is everything this year to maximize your gifts. Now, thanks to President Donald Trump's tax and spending package, charitable tax donations are about to see the biggest change in nearly a decade in the year of 2026. The new rules affect itemizers and non-itemizers alike, but differently. Now, depending on which you are, financial experts have different advice for how to handle charitable contributions this year and the next. Itemizers should hit fast forward and give their gifts this year. But people who don't itemize, that's a hefty 9 out of 10 Americans, they may want to pause until 2026 so they can maximize deductions, the experts say. This is important, and it ends up being something a lot of clients want to talk about, even if they really came to talk to us about something else. So, what is changing for itemizers who make charitable donations? 2 major changes for those who itemize deductions. They start in 2026. And here's the first one. A 0.5% adjusted gross income, that's the AGI floor. Only charitable contributions that exceed 0.5% of a taxpayer's AGI are deductible. Then, a 35% cap on deduction value. For only those in the top 37% tax bracket, this tax benefit from all itemized deductions, not just charitable contributions, for taxpayers will be capped at a 35% tax rate. So, what is changing for non-itemizers who give? Those who take the standard deductions instead of itemizing, now that's about 90% of filers according to the IRS's data, they can claim a charitable contribution deduction beginning next year. Above the line deduction, non-itemizers will be able to claim a deduction for cash donations of up to $1,000 for single filers and then $2,000 for couples who file jointly. Only cash donations are counted for the deductions, and the amounts are not annually adjusted for inflation. This new deduction is like the temporary $300 deduction for single and $600 for joint non-itemizing filers that was during the COVID-19 pandemic back in 2020 and 21 that did help boost donations among small donors. IRS statistics of income data showed more than 42 million additional taxpayers claimed that deduction, resulting in an almost $11 billion boost to charities back in 2020. So, how should taxpayers time their gifts to maximize their deductions? Itemizers can avoid the new floor in 2026 by giving more this season, experts say. Donors who give this year, they would receive a tax deduction for their entire charitable contribution instead of just that portion above the 0.5% of their AGI. High net worth givers may also consider bunching or combining 2 or more years of donations in 2025 to avoid the haircut on the cap of 35% from 37% on all itemized deductions, they claim, the experts said. Now, to illustrate how much taxpayers can save, let's say a high-income individual filer with $1 million AGI donates $20,000. In the year of 2026, because of the 0.5% of the AGI floor, $5,000 would not be deductible. The remaining donation of $15,000 would receive only a 35% tax benefit, or that would be $5,250. In the year of 2025, that full $20,000 donation would receive the 37% tax benefit rate, which would be $7,400. Non-itemizers should also consider doing the opposite and then wait until 2026 to donate their cash to get a deduction, the experts said, because donations in 2025 don't receive any deduction. And last, they say, how can itemizers accelerate donations in the year of 2025? Other than writing one giant check, experts say itemizers might consider, here's first, they have bullet points. The first one is Donor Advised Fund, that's a DAF. Givers can contribute any amount to a DAF, take an immediate tax deduction for it, and then use the DAF money for donations over time. The money also can be invested to grow. This is a good option for people who don't want to hand over 4 times the amount in an organization now, says Claudia Gonzalez, who's the principal in Kaufman Rosen's Tax Services Advisory Group. They can just pay it out over 3 to 7 years. And the next bullet point is foundation. A private foundation would have to be established and disperse a certain amount of money each year. This is an option for people who want total control over their donations, but they usually cost more to establish and then run. And their last bullet point is clean house. Cash isn't the only charitable contribution that is deductible. So are properties and goods. Yes, clean out the house and donate everything you've wanted to get rid of, Gonzalez said. It's not just from tax and economic point of view, but it's also cathartic to do that. If you have a college student or an older family member too, it can just be cleansing, she said. And here's another reminder. You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. My time is now 12:41, it says, and I'm still in the money section. Next up, I have USA Today's column with our expert Johnny C. Taylor, and it says, you can feel confident when stepping into a leadership role. And of course, Johnny C. Taylor is our expert in human resources. Here's our first question to Johnny. I've been tapped for a senior leadership position, and while it's my dream role, I just can't shake the feeling that I might not be good enough. Part of me is waiting for my employer to tell me why they do believe I'm ready. Is it normal to look for that kind of validation? How can I feel more confident on my own? And this is asked by Naomi. And here's Johnny's answer to Naomi. Being tapped for a senior role, that's one of the greatest compliments an employer can give you. And yet, it is perfectly normal for your first thought to be, do you really mean me? Stepping into greater leadership, it isn't scary because you're unqualified. It's scary because it matters. Now to the heart of the question. Is it your employer's job to reassure you that you are ready? I'll say this as gently as I can. No, it's not their job to give you a pep talk. In fact, they already gave you all the validation you need when they offered you this role. But here's the part that people don't talk about often enough. Men and women often approach opportunity very differently. Men tend to walk into a new job as if they've already been running the place. They assume that they'll learn what they don't know. But women, even exceptionally capable ones, they tend to think, let me make sure I check every box first. That's not about ability, it's about confidence. I once recommended a woman on my team for a significant leadership role. Brilliant, talented, absolutely ready. But then, days later, she was still waiting for me to confirm that she was the right choice. I finally just told her, Trust me, I don't hand out senior roles like party favors. And then we both laughed. But it did make the point. The offer is the vote of confidence. And the truth is, opportunities don't sit still. While you're hesitating, someone else could step forward. Now, I know confidence may not come naturally to everyone, and it certainly just doesn't magically appear because you're offered a better title. But you can build it, and here are a few tips that have helped me over the years. Here's this first one. Find mentors and coaches. You need trusted voices, people that you can bounce ideas off, pressure test decisions with, and then turn to for honest feedback. Another one is track your wins. I keep them in a notebook. Successes, compliments, results. Then when doubt shows up, you go back to your receipts. Doubt hates evidence. His next point is permit yourself to grow into the role. Almost no one feels 100% ready on day one. Confidence, it often comes after you step into that role, not before. And his last point is practice humility. The corner office, that comes with real pressure to perform and prove that you do have what it takes. But that doesn't mean pretending you know it all on your first day. Stay humble. The leaders who excel, they are the ones who learn from those with more experience and then deliver with confidence. At the end of the day, your employer already believes you're ready. They have seen your judgment, your performance, and your potential. They chose you, and they chose you on purpose. So the real question isn't whether you're good enough. It's whether you're willing to seize this opportunity. And if the role scares you a little and excites you a lot, well, that's usually your cue. Take the job and then rise up to meet it, Johnny says. Alrighty, let's go on. I'm on page 4 of the money section, the back page. And there's a big giant picture of a gallon of milk in a store shelf. And you can see the price below it, it's a whole milk gallon, is $3.99. And the title is Some Dairy Product Prices Are Falling Slightly. Oversupply and weak demand leads to some changes. Oversupply and weakening consumer demand have been causing milk, butter, and cheese prices on the wholesale market and at the grocery store to fall slightly. The lower prices on the dairy staples, they are good news for shoppers who have been struggling with rising grocery prices amid inflation and tariff increases. We just have a lot of milk here in the U.S. right now. Stephen Kane, who's VP of Economic Policy and Market Analysis for the National Milk Producers Federation, he told USA Today, farmers are cranking out a lot of milk, and that's translating into a lot of dairy product production, and domestic demand has been somewhat soft this year. So, what is happening with dairy wholesale markets? Wholesale market prices for milk, cheese, and butter, they have been lower than normal for about a year, but had more of a significant decline in the past 6 months, Kane has said. There has been a significant easing of the prices, especially butter and cheese, he said, but that was largely driven by our milk supply. Milk production is up nearly 4% this year, when the average is usually 1% to 2% growth, he said. That supply and softening demand translates to downward pressure on prices, Kane said. But wholesale market prices don't always get reflected at the retail store for shoppers, or there may be a lag, he says. We'll likely start to see retail prices ease some, but it will take a little bit of time for those who move down with the market, he said. Sometimes retailers aren't as quick to lower prices than wholesale or commodity prices fall, he says. Additionally, the dairy wholesale markets have had more volatility in the last 18 months, and it's often cyclical, says Phil Ploward, head of insights for EverAg, an agricultural commodity market and risk management firm with a concentration on dairy. Now, for instance, the wholesale price of butter was above $3 a pound for nearly 2 years. Now it's about half that price. One of the challenges with dairy is that it's not like a factory production where you can just add or take away a shift, he says. Dairy farmers will be getting the signal to slow down milk production because prices are under pressure. But they don't just lay off the cows, he says, adding that the production cycle is very intricate, having to do with biology and with the weather. So, what is happening with the store prices for milk, butter, and cheese? Now, according to the latest Consumer Price Index figures from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the prices for milk, butter, and cheese, they are all down. A gallon of milk in November was about $4, rounded from $3.99, compared with $4.17 in August, and that's a 4.2% decline. The milk price was a 3.4% decline from November of 2024, when the price was about $4.14. A pound of stick butter in November, that was $4.31. Now that's down 10.7% from August's price of $4.83, and then it was 10.1% lower than the November 24 price. That was $4.79 for that pound. A pound of cheddar cheese was $5.64 in November, and that was 8.0% lower than the August price of $6.12 and 0.7% lower than November 24 price. That was $5.65. So, why is there reduced consumer demand for milk, butter, and cheese? Consumer demand at the retail or the grocery store for milk, butter, and cheese, it has mostly been strong, Kane said, but the food service industry, like fast food, has seen reduced consumer demand, he said. Now, in particular, cheese consumption is down 2% in the last year, when it normally sees a 2% to 3% growth domestically, he said. Whenever consumers pull back, they pull back the most from food service first and then from retail, which is groceries, Kane said. That decline in demand could continue in 2026, especially among lower-income consumers who are pulling back on their discretionary spending, he says. The global market for dairy has an oversupply, which is affecting prices even though import and export activity for U.S. dairy is relatively low, said Kane. Pollard said it's unusual that globally everybody is clicking on all cylinders all at the same time. Now, additionally, while milk consumption continues to go down, demand for other dairy products like whey, yogurt, ultra-filtered milk, and then other protein drinks, that has created tailwinds for dairy farmers, processors, and brands, said Garth Boyd, and he's a principal in the food and agricultural practice of Kearney. It's a global strategy and management consulting firm. There are more than 53 dairy processing plants either being built or adding capacity in the U.S. Now, that represents some $10 billion of capital expenditure, Boyd has said. And now I'm going to take you back to our front page section. I'm on the back page on page 6. I have an interesting article that says, Engineer and wheelchair makes user history. Let's not stop here, she says after her Blue Origin trip. And there's an excellent picture. You can see a lady sitting in the window of a space capsule, and she's in her astronaut suit. She's looking out the window, and it's on the ground. And it reads, Michaela, she's called Mitchie Benthouse, deboards a Blue Origin space capsule back on December of the 20th. So, a 33-year-old aerospace engineer has made space travel history, becoming the first person who uses a wheelchair to pass the boundary of outer space. Michaela, they call her Mitchie Benthouse. She's a German aerospace engineer at the European Space Agency. She blasted into space on December 20th with 5 other passengers aboard Blue Origin's New Shepard rocket, completing a dream she thought might never be possible. Benthouse, who is a longtime adventurer, she injured her spinal cord back in a 2018 mountain biking accident, and she has used a wheelchair ever since. I really figured out how inaccessible our world still is, she says. Sometimes how socially excluding a wheelchair can be, Benthouse said in a Blue Origin interview. Video footage from the voyage published by Blue Origin shows Benthouse and the 5 other passengers aboard the flight floating in the air as they looked out the window down at the blue ball of the earth below. Let's not stop here, Benthouse said when she deboarded the Blue Origin rocket. The 10-minute space flight, it took the crew just above the Kármán line. Now that's a recognized demarcation between the Earth's atmosphere and outer space, that sits about 62 miles above sea level. It marked the 37th flight of Blue Origin's New Shepard program. It's a reusable spacecraft developed for the company's suborbital missions that takes passengers on trips above the Earth's atmosphere. Blue Origin, the commercial spaceflight company that was founded by billionaire Jeff Bezos, launched the flight from its private ranch in Texas near the U.S.-Mexico border, known as Launch Site 1. Now, the other passengers on the flight included Florida physicist Joey Hyde, German-American aerospace engineer Hans Koenigsmann, who previously worked at SpaceX, energy sector entrepreneur Adonis Pouroulis, and West Texas space enthusiast called Jason Stansel. Blue Origin said it designed its spaceflight program with accessibility in mind. The company provided adaptations to help Benthouse, like a special strap to keep her legs securely as her body lifted into space's microgravity. If we want to be an inclusive society, we should be inclusive in every part, Benthouse said. Jared Isaacman, the Trump administration's new NASA administrator, applauded Benthouse's journey in a post. "Congratulations, Mitchie. You just inspired millions to look up and imagine what's possible," said Isaacman, the founder and former CEO of a payment processing company. And now I'm continuing in our section 1, and I'm still on the back page. My next article is "The last of the 3 inmates who escaped through the jail wall is recaptured." The last of the 3 inmates who escaped from a Louisiana jail by removing mortar and concrete blocks from a degraded part of the wall earlier in December, he has been captured, authorities said. Keith Anthony Eli II, who's 24, was taken into custody in Opelousas, Louisiana, St. Landry Parish Sheriff Bobby Gundrose said in a news release on December the 19th. Opelousas, it's a small city in St. Landry Parish. It's about 138 miles from New Orleans. Acting quickly on information, narcotics detectives and SWAT converged on a structure in Opelousas and were able to apprehend Keith Eli without incident, the sheriff has said. At the time of the escape, Eli and 2 other inmates, that was 24-year-old Jonathan Javon Joseph and 26-year-old Joseph Allen Harrington, were being held at the St. Landry Parish Jail on violent criminal charges, according to the sheriff's office. Authorities had discovered the escape on the morning of December 3rd. The 3 inmates found a degrading part of the upper wall area, and over time they were able to remove the mortar and the concrete blocks to create a hole large enough to escape. They then used sheets and other items to scale down the outer wall of the jail, drop onto a roof, and lower themselves to the ground. The inmates were being held on charges of violent nature. The sheriff's office warned the public that these 3 inmates were being held on charges of a violent nature. Eli had been charged with attempted second-degree murder. Joseph was charged with being principal to a first-degree rape, possession with the intent to distribute marijuana, and multiple firearms charges. Gidros previously told USA Today that Joseph was recaptured on December 5th, while Harrington was found soon after the escape. The latest incident involving Louisiana jails. The December 3rd escape, that marked the latest incident involving a Louisiana jail in the year of 2025. Earlier this year, 10 inmates brazenly escaped from a New Orleans jail. Authorities previously said that the inmates fled through a hole in the cell wall after ripping away a toilet and a sink unit in the early morning of May 16th. Most of the escapees, they were caught in weeks after, and since then, multiple people have been charged in helping these inmates escape or either stay on the run. The final inmate was recaptured back on October 8th, nearly 5 months after the escape. Derek Groves, a convicted murderer, was found in Atlanta and taken back into custody after a standoff. In July, that same New Orleans jail mistakenly released an inmate after mixing him up with someone else. He was then back in custody a month later. Now, amid the search for the New Orleans jail escapee, another inmate who had fled a different Louisiana jail was also recaptured for the second time in May. Several deputies, they were placed on leave for making errors that have led to this escape. And you've been listening to a reading of articles from our USA Today for Tuesday, December the 23rd of 2025 on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We'll return to you for more readings after our short break. And your reader for this hour again today has been Jody.
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio Reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dashes tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dashes tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dashes tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring.
We'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's issue of the USA Today. Your reader for this hour is Mikey, and today's issue is December 23rd. I'm going to continue along here with the fault lines of the sports section. But first we're going to talk about the Patriots. While the Patriots have a winning identity, while the Ravens is one of regret. To consider it a war of attrition was one way to assess the Sunday night tilt at the big ATM on December 21st. The Baltimore Ravens lost Lamar Jackson just before halftime of the game. They needed to have a back injury. Then they lost the game too. Yet, the New England Patriots surely had a full share of injury setbacks too. While surviving with the 28-24 triumph that clinched a playoff berth in Mike Vrabel's first year as coach, they needed to have. Another way to assess the results, though, was reflected in identity, and that is not a good thing for the Ravens, or 7-8, who blew it again while fighting for their playoff lives. Sure, the Patriots, who are 12-3, bounced back in dramatic fashion, rallying from an 11-point four-quarter deficit a week after coughing up a 21-point lead in losing to the Buffalo Bills with a chance to win the AFC East title. This time, Drake May, who threw for 380 yards and 2 touchdowns, not only notched his first NFL 300-yard game, he also posted his first professional fourth-quarter comeback win. All told, it was an indication of lessons learned from a missed opportunity. With resilience, you can believe that Vrabel seeks to instill in his evolving operation. We talked about bringing a belief in our identity, Vrabel said, believing that under any circumstances we were going to win a football game. That's what we talked about before we left. We said we needed to pack 2 things. We needed to pack our belief and our identity. I feel like we did. But in another sense, haven't we seen this before? Of course we have. from John Harbaugh's team. It's safe to suggest that no would-be contender in the NFL in recent years has squandered big fourth-quarter leads quite like the Ravens. Since 2022, the Ravens have lost 9 games after holding double-digit leads in the second half. As much as they'd want to think otherwise, that is an unfortunate essential to their identity. And fumbles or not, they just let another one slip away. The loss left Baltimore, which plays at Green Bay on Saturday, without control of its playoff destiny. Even with an upset win against the Packers, the Ravens would be eliminated with a Pittsburgh victory at Cleveland, which would give the Steelers the AFC North crown. The formula for heartbreak goes beyond Jackson going down in what has been such a trying season, which was severely unhinged when he missed the 4 games due to a hamstring injury. There was also another momentum-swinging Derrick Henry fumble, this time in the first quarter, when the Ravens seemed poised to go up to 2 touchdowns. Patriots safety Jalen Hawkins punched the football loose, and it jump-started a 10-play, game-tying TD drive for the Patriots. "It's just really embarrassing," Henry said. "I feel like I took a little bit of the momentum from the team." Take away that gaffe, and it was a banner night for Henry. He rushed for 128 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he averaged 7.1 yards per carry. It was inexplicable that he never touched the ball in crunch time, as in 0 carries after his 2-yard score made it 24-13 early in the fourth quarter. That, too, has happened before with the Ravens, with Harbaugh and his offensive coordinator, Todd Monken, seemingly intent to go with a rotation that gets Keaton Mitchell 9 rushes, 13 yards, 1.4 yards per carry, some work rather than going with a hot hand. "It's part of that rotation," Harbaugh said afterward. "He was going to go back in the game, then we just got stopped." Not the most convincing explanation. Then there's Zay Flowers. Typically, the slippery Baltimore player was the go-to target in the passing game, 7 catches and 84 yards, for Jackson and his sub, Tyler Huntley. He also delivered with a splendid 18-yard touchdown burst on a jet sweep. Yet Flowers also had the ball punched out for a fumble in the fourth quarter. Linebacker Kavon Chasen forced it by rallying back to the football, which essentially doomed Baltimore. And no, it's hardly the first time that Flowers has made a crucial error in a big moment. It was Flowers' 3rd lost fumble of the season. Compounded with Henry's issues with fumbles, it's no wonder that the Patriots' defense had such a heavy emphasis during the practice week on creating turnovers. "We knew they had a couple of speed skaters on their side," Chasen said, referring to the running style of Henry and Flowers, leaving the football exposed. "So obviously it's time for us to make a play." That's one way to create an identity. Of course, it goes both ways. The Ravens lost their 6th home game of the season. So much for the home field advantage that used to be so well established for Baltimore. That's the old identity. Meanwhile, the upstart Patriots are 7-0 on the road this season, and they've shown an ability to bounce back from a heartbreaking defeat. A week earlier, they had a chance to win with a last-minute drive and came up short. This time, they started at their 11-yard line with 5 minutes and 2 seconds on the not even 2 seconds, less than 2 seconds on the clock, and didn't flinch. May led an 89-year-old touchdown drive capped by Ramondre Stevenson's 21-yard scoring jaunt. That's an identity to grow with. It was kind of a wake-up call last week, May said. We had a chance to win the game with a game-winning drive, and this week it was like, let's not have the same feeling 2 weeks in a row. It was kind of an elephant in the room, going out there once the defense got the ball back. Like I said, just trust and belief. I like our chances when we're in those scenarios. I like our chances. Which sounds like the ultimate identity. Now let's go back on the front page. And after the Patriots, we also have fault lines. Worst part about the college football playoff, the fall magic entertainment chaos are missing. The worst part about college football playoffs cannot be fixed, cannot be legislated away by changing the bracket format, cannot be solved by replacing a few folks on the selection committee. You know why? Because the worst part of college football's postseason is that it's not the regular season. The play-off cannot mimic a fall Saturday stuffed with 50 games, including the conference tussles and the rivalry clashes that make you fall in love with this sport. Now let me turn the page and we'll see what else this guy's got to say. You can eradicate automatic bids from the playoffs. You can tweak the season selectional process, and you can snuff out Cinderella. And perhaps those are worthwhile explorations after 2 first-round games involving group of 5 teams spiraled into predictable blowouts. And still, none of those modifications would fix the playoffs' unfixable issue, that 50 games are better than 4, that the regular season rat race is superior to the bracketed conclusion. None of those modifications would change that last year's first-round games featured no group of 5 teams. Each of those games stunk. Blowouts happen, including in the college football playoff. I hate to be the one to tell you, but blowouts sometimes are going to happen in football, no matter how much tinkering you do. Blowouts didn't begin with the 12-team playoff. In fact, blowouts transpired at a coma-threatening rate during the 4-team playoff era. And wouldn't you know it, a number of blowouts transpired in the last NFL playoffs too. The nagging issue here, the one you can't format change away, is not that blowouts happen, but there's not another playoff game you can flip when one does. You can flip to when one does. In the regular season, if the ballyhooed big noon kickoff game becomes a stinker, well, some team coached by a guy named Swinney is on an upset alert on ESPN. Just flip the channel. If the primetime conference matchup quickly wilts into a blowout on NBC, well, try the in-state rivalry on ABC. And when UCLA comes out of nowhere to land an uppercut on James Franklin, you scramble to your guide button to figure out what channel that game is on. You cannot replicate that a playoff Saturday when a single game sucks up a 3.5-hour time slot, and if, God forbid, the game gets lopsided, you're left to choose between an NFL field goal fest or a Hallmark Christmas movie. The CFP bracket is not March Madness. We've got to stop comparing college football's postseason to March Madness because it avoids blowouts. You love it because it's the number 1 seed beats the number 16 directional school by 40 points, and an 8 versus 9 brick fest turns out to be less fun than you hoped. You're flipping to TNT, where the 3 seed is in big trouble, and you love it because you called that upset on your bracket. Football's postseason will not recreate basketball's 48 games in 4 days. Football's can't be missed bonanza occurs during rivalry week in November instead of at the end of the season. Unless you want to completely devalue the regular season and bloat the playoff to a gluttonous size, you're simply not going to replicate that feast in the playoff. I won't try to tell you Notre Dame, Oregon wouldn't have been more interesting than James Mason, Oregon, if playoff format rules had allowed the committee to choose the Irish instead of the Dukes. That probably would have been a better game in a 12 best teams parallel universe. Although someone somewhere would bemoan the underdog is now the tragic omission from college football's postseason. Notably, Notre Dame, Oregon would have hit the spot. But I'll also remind you the Irish once lost by 28 stinking points in a national championship game. TCU saw that postseason beatdown and years later said, quote, "Hold my beer," unquote. Do you remember when Michigan State got whipped in a playoff game 38-0? Or how about when the Ohio State University lost 31-0? You probably turned those games off. I wouldn't blame you, because blowouts are boring, no matter whether the losing team hails from the Group of Five or from the Big Ten. Even Nick Saban got stomped once in the playoff. And he wasn't coaching one of those AAA teams he's tired of watching. Blowouts happen, folks. No amount of wish casting or format tweaking will extinguish them. They're more glaring in the playoff because there's no barn burner occurring simultaneously. Just be thankful that when the blowouts happen in the regular season, elsewhere on your dial, big game James stands on the ledge, and the natives are furious because Penn State is about to lose to 21 and a half point underdog Northwestern. Quick, where's the remote? This was written by Blake Topmeyer, the USA Today Network senior national college football columnist. You're just listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is about 16 minutes after the hour. Let's see what else we've got here. We read the front page, so let's take a look at what they think is important enough to be next. Temperature rising for Cowboys coordinator? Michael Middlehurst Schwartz wrote this. A bit of initial magic befitting the holiday season couldn't sustain itself in NFL Week 16. The state of games got off to a scintillating start Thursday, December 18th, with the Seattle Seahawks prevailing over the Los Angeles Rams to shift the landscape of the NFC West in the race for the conference's top seed. The excitement didn't let up on Saturday when the Chicago Bears surged past the Green Bay Packers to seize control of the NFC North in thrilling fashion. But the drama led up considerably on Sunday, reinforcing just how front-loaded the week's schedule was. Yet there was still plenty of fallout to sort through as the Bears and San Francisco 49ers punched their post-position tickets. Here are the biggest winners and losers of Week 16 in the NFL. Winners, Justin Herbert. The Los Angeles Chargers quarterback has shouldered a disproportionate burden for an offense that lost its bookend offensive tackles, with his workload tipping into untenable territory in recent weeks after he suffered a broken bone in his left hand. Herbert returned to top form, however, with a dazzling performance in a 34-17 win against the Dallas Cowboys. In completing 23 of 29 passes for 300 yards and in 2 touchdowns, Herbert balanced efficiency with aggression, keeping the offense moving with his work underneath while still connecting on 2 long scores and a host of other downfield shots. And despite being blitzed on a season-high 54.7% of his dropbacks, according to Next Gen Stats, Herbert did not take a single sack in the game, marking a first for him in 2025. Perhaps this is more telling of the Chargers' opponent than it is of Herbert and the offense. More on that later. But it marked important progress ahead of Week 17's tilt against the Houston Texans and their imposing pass rush. Jacksonville Jaguars. 2 weeks ago, Trevor Lawrence ruminated on his team's place in the larger football landscape by declaring nobody really cares about the Jags, which is fine. By the end of the season, a lot more people might have to at least pay attention to them. With a 34-20 win over the Denver Broncos, Jacksonville not only kept its hopes alive for the AFC's number 1 seed, but also delivered a statement that the team would be fully worthy if it ends up atop the conference playoff pecking order against a defense that had crushed all comers in the passing game. Lawrence once again sizzled, keying in on the quick game while throwing 3 touchdowns and running for another. Parker Washington, who finished with 145 yards on 10 receptions, was critical to the attack's mission of doing a good deal of damage after the catch. Long an afterthought in the AFC playoff race, Jacksonville might be as dangerous as any other team in the postseason if the team maintains this trajectory. Pittsburgh Steelers backfield. On a day when DK Metcalf's most explosive moment was his physical confrontation with the Detroit Lions fan, the Steelers turned to their backfield to provide a needed spark in an eventual 29-24 win. Kenneth Gainwell got things going just before halftime when he managed to secure an Aaron Rodgers deep heave right after falling to the turf, with the 5th year back when racing into the end zone to tie it at 10-10. Then Jaylen Warren broke loose in the ground game for a pair of 45-yard scores in the second half. Amid a good deal of drama, the Steelers now are in a prime position to seal their first AFC North title since 2020. Latham Ransom. 1 week after his unnecessary roughness penalty helped facilitate the New Orleans Saints upset, the Carolina Panthers rookie safety found himself in a much kinder spotlight on Sunday. Ransom hauled in his first NFL interception when he secured an errant Baker Mayfield pass to seal a 23-20 win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It was part of a stellar overall effort for Carolina's rookie class, with Tedaroa McMillan, I'm butchering that name, continuing to build his case for Offensive Rookie of the Year with 6 catches, 73 yards, and a touchdown, while Nick Scorton's persistence in the pass rush helped keep Mayfield out of sorts. Unless the Buccaneers fall to the Miami Dolphins and the Panthers upset the Seahawks, then the division crown will still come down to a winner-take-all Week 18 rematch. But holding things down at home was still an important step, as Carolina would have been in trouble with a loss and an unfavorable Week 17 setup. Cam Ward, beating the empty husk that is the current edition of the Kansas City Chiefs, probably isn't cause for celebration for many teams. Yet in a trying season for the Tennessee Titans, the franchise has to cling to whatever scattered positive signs emerge. Most of those have typically come back to Ward, the number one pick, who has shown promise despite the Titans basically calling the season a wash after just 6 games. His latest outing was a showcase of significant growth, as his 2.42 second average time to throw represented his quickest mark all season, according to Next Gen Stats. Still, Ward managed to mix in some calculated shots, including an incredible 30-yard completion downfield to rookie Shamir Dyke as a quarterback escaped to his left. With the touchdown squad, with 6 touchdowns and just 1 interception in his last 3 games, Ward is enjoying the kind of steady ascension that augurs extremely well for year 2, so long as he is paired with a new coach who buys into the dynamic skill set he offers while still helping him become a more efficient passer. Chris Olave. The Saints made it clear at the trade deadline that the speedy receiver would be a vital part of the team's future, but his price tag looks to be increasing exponentially. In a 29-6 win over the New York Jets, Olave notched a season-high 148 yards and 2 touchdowns on 10 catches. The fourth-year wideout is one of the many figures in New Orleans to be rejuvenated by Tyler Shaw's installation as the starting quarterback, with 5 of his 8 touchdowns this season coming in the past 6 weeks, and with a 29-year-old possession receiver, Jacoby Myers, inking a 3-year, $600 million contract extension last week. Olave is positioning himself for a massive payout this offseason, with only his 5th-year option still remaining on his deal. Losers. Matt Eberflus. Moving from the field to the coach's booth didn't do much for a change in perspective or efficacy for the Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator. Eberflus' unit surrendered a touchdown on each of the Chargers' first 3 drives and allowed 7.3 yards per play on the day. Yes, being without Quinnen Williams only amplified the need to depend on the blitz to generate a pass rush. But this post Micah Parsons front being unable to do what almost every other team has managed to do in pummeling Hetbert is a massive indictment of both scheme and personnel. A clearly exhausted Jerry Jones said after the game he wouldn't make any in-season decisions on Eberflus, but he stopped well short of backing the embattled coordinator. I might not couch it as difficult, Jones told reporters when asked about assessing Eberflus's future. It's certainly something that we have to do, with Brian Schottenheimer and the scintillating offense doing more than their part. It's difficult to find much of a case for bringing back the man who oversees a unit that ranks 31st in points allowed. The Baltimore Ravens. A Lamar Jackson injury, an offense undone by turnovers, and a defense that can't hold firm when it counts. In a 28-24 loss to the New England Patriots, the Ravens played all the hits while speed running a season collapse. Maybe Jackson's exit with a back injury spelled doom for Baltimore playoff hopes, which now hinge on both a win on Saturday over the Green Bay Packers, as well as a Steelers loss to the Cleveland Browns next Sunday. But John Harbaugh's crew is not merely the victim of circumstance, as there are no excuses for a team that trips itself up with this frequency. The NFL's Christmas lineup. Heading into Sunday, Netflix and Prime Video's holiday tripleheader was already set to feature 4 teams that had been eliminated from playoff contention, including a Chiefs team with significantly less appeal after Patrick Mahomes' season-ending knee injury. But things might be getting even more dire for the streamers. Kansas City backup Gardner Minshew feared torn anterior cruciate ligament could leave the team to start Chris Oladokun against the Denver Broncos and their vaulted pass rush. If that name doesn't ring a bell, fear not. Oladokun is known only to Chief diehards, the NFL draft devotees, and preseason football aficionados. Meanwhile, J.J. McCarthy's hand injury might leave the Minnesota Vikings to start undrafted rookie Max Brosmer, who had a disastrous debut as a first stringer against the Seahawks. Instead of tuning into inconsequential, unenticing games on Christmas, it might be time for you to dust off an old movie or even spend time with the family. Now, we're going to switch sections and read the life section. Making Waves. Savannah Guthrie is going to kick off 2026 by focusing on her health. The Today Show Health 53 revealed she will be taking a brief hiatus from the NBC morning show in the new year to undergo vocal surgery. Some of you have noticed that my voice has been very scratchy and started to crack a little bit. Well, I have found out what it is. I have vocal nodules, and now I also have a polyp, she said during the show's December 19th broadcast. Vocal cord lesions are growths that may form on one or both vocal cords and typically are the result of a person overusing or misusing their voice, according to the Cleveland Clinic. Despite the setback, Guthrie said she was, quote, really excited, unquote, about the diagnosis after struggling with symptoms for years. Co-host Chenille Jones, who underwent the same surgery, joked, well, maybe you'll come out singing like, I don't know, Celine Dion. Jackman finds new facets of Neil Diamond. Hugh Jackman has done The Greatest Showman, playing a singing version of Ringmaster P.T. Barnum in the 2017 movie musical, as well as playing Ozzy variety show king Peter Allen to Tony Award acclaim in Broadway's The Boy from Oz. But Jackman, 54, has never entered the Neil Diamond universe until Song Sun Blue, the Ba 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 movie musical depicting the improbable rise of middle-aged Diamond interpreter Mike Sardina. Struggling musician Sardina, who died in 2006, became a 90s sensation in the Milwaukee area with his wife, Claire, played by Kate Hudson, performing as a duo, Lightning and Thunder. Mike Sardina wanted to take the essence of Neil without impersonating him. It's very cool, but very different from how I sing, Jackman says. The movie is a love letter to Mike and a love letter to Neil Diamond, whose songs were Mike's lifeline. Here's how Jackman got to Touching Me, in the Diamond-inspired movie in theaters on Christmas Day. Jackman was schooled in Neil Diamond music. Growing up in Sydney, Jackman was still part of the Neil Diamond global empire. In the 70s, you couldn't ride your bike down the street without hearing Hot August Night, says Jackman of the Diamond 1972 live album. I knew Neil Diamond's music. Australia is one of his biggest fan territories. The actor fell fully in love when he steeped himself in the singer's deep songbook, required prep for the 13 movie musical numbers. That was my only music when we were filming last year, he says. Diamond is in his top 10 list of all-time performers because of the Sweet Caroline singer's infectious appeal and presence. He's not just one of the greatest songwriters of all time. He really connects to audiences. You love the music, and he makes everyone feel like he's singing just to them. That's a rare quality. The star was inspired by a real lightning and thunder story. Writer and director Craig Brewer has been obsessed with lightning and thunder since watching the 2008 documentary Song Sung Blue by director Greg Coase, which followed the Sardinas for 8 roller coaster years. That struggling musician story hooked Jackman as much as the music did. I loved the documentary and the story so much that I had to make this, even though it took us 4 years, Jackman says. It's this love story of 2 struggling artists with massive, maybe naive dreams who just wouldn't give up, no matter what life threw at them. They stuck to each other and their dreams. The costumes were Neil Diamond by way of lightning. Jackman wore 2 versions of Neil Diamond wigs as Sardinia homed in on his hair look for the act. The Wolverine-esque sideburns in some of the iterations were all Jackman's. In terms of costumes, the Sardinas, sorry, that's not a familiar name for me, couldn't reach the true opulence of Diamond's legendary concert apparel, but brought plenty of bling for their buck. Their costumes are homespun, and that shows. I love that, Jackman says. They didn't have a lot of money, so they dig these costumes up from all over the place. Jackman relished rocking Sardina's tighty whities. Sardina has a memorable scene in the documentary, walking around his house in his underpants. Jackman wears the snug briefs twice on screen, including during a private living room concert that would make risky business era Tom Cruise blush. There's something about Mike, who doesn't have an embarrassed bone in his body, Jackman says. I love that about him. Jackman also lacks the embarrassed bone that had no problem shooting the comically revealing scenes in unflattering black socks. I'm not that shy. If you're in theater, you've got to be comfortable being naked or almost naked in the wings. I was laughing, the crew was laughing. It was pretty great. Jackman nixed, putting on weight for health reasons. Coming off his 2024 Marvel caper, Deadpool and Wolverine, with Ryan Reynolds, Jackman was in superhero shape before playing Sardina, who carried a more common middle-aged physique. The actor nixed packing on the pounds for the part. I've done that before, but I'm 57 years old. I don't think my heart is going to be happy with me putting on 50 pounds. I said to Greg, can't we just hide me? Because I don't want to do that to my body. Jackman visited Diamond and let the legend pick the karaoke songs. After filming, Jackman took up Diamond's invitation to visit the 84-year-old singer's Colorado home. Diamond, who retired from touring after being diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 2018, suggested the karaoke session with his son Jesse and Jackman. The legendary singer picked up the songs. You don't go to the Diamond house and suggest what everybody's going to sing, says Jackman, who sang along with the Diamond classic Sweet Caroline and Elvis Presley's Can't Help Falling in Love. I was fully aware of what was happening and made sure someone was filming. even though I can't stand listening to myself sing," said Jackman, who posted portions of their sing-along on Instagram. It was a pinch-yourself moment for sure. Okay. Arnett felt a new kind of terrified on stand-up stage. Even if you somehow don't know Will Arnett's name or face, you likely know his voice. His signature gravelly tone gives life to Lego Batman and can be heard on the Smartless podcast. Turn on the TV and one of his many Reese's commercials is probably airing. So embarking on a mini stand-up comedy career for his new movie, Is This Thing On?, and running into audiences unfamiliar with his work was a humbling experience. I was hoping that they were people from out of the country just for my own ego, he says with a laugh. Director Bradley Cooper's new film, now in select theaters nationwide January 9th, cast Arnett as Alex Novak, a middle-aged dad on the cusp of a divorce from his wife, Tess, who's played by Laura Dern. Excuse me. He winds up on stage during a comedy club's open mic night, where he spills his feelings about his relationship. It ends up becoming a healthy catharsis for him while also complicating his marriage. Although he has plenty of comedy roles, from Arrested Development to 30 Rock, Arnett says he came to stand-up totally late. Growing up in comedy-rich Toronto, he didn't do stand-up or sketch performances. Arnett moved to New York City at 20 with the intent of doing, lost my place, with the intent of doing more dramatic and serious stuff. Quote, he became interested in stand-up a couple years ago. Arnett had the idea for the movie, inspired by British pharmaceutical rep turned comedian John Bishop, and co-wrote the script with his buddy Cooper and Mark Chappelle. Arnett realized, quote, how daunting and scary live comedy is, and experienced, quote, that thing in my stomach, unquote, from nerves once he started doing it. I don't know if you ever lose that. He would take the stage as Alec Novak and work out material that ended up in the film. Arnett is a veteran performer, but stand-up made him feel, quote, a new kind of terrified, he said. The audience is like, great, make me laugh. That's it. There's nowhere to hide. I have some connection to performing and entertainment, of course. Alex Novak has no connection to this world. He gets up because he didn't want to pay a cover charge and ends up telling his truth. So I had to try to put myself in the mindset of this guy. Arnett performed to a mix of audience members who knew him and others who didn't. I'd get up there and they'd say, please welcome to the stage for the first time, Alex Novak. Some people who were there, maybe comedy fans, would be kind of excited like, oh, this is going to be, what's going on? What name did they just say? But there were some nights where he bombed. But Arnett recalls a rewarding moment on a New Joke Monday at the Fat Black Pussycat, where the crowd included couples from Germany and Israel, plus folks from France and Portugal, but few Americans. I'm thinking like, oh boy, how's this going to go tonight, he says. They're going to be like, why is this depressed man coming on stage talking about his life? Afterward, we're hanging out, and this woman comes up to me and she goes, I think it's really sweet that you miss your wife. Did you tell her? Does she know? And I was like, oh, wow, this might work. So there we go with him. Let's find out whose birthday is today. Singer-songwriter, guitarist Jorma Kaukonen, Jefferson Airplane and Hot Tuna, turns 85. Actor comedian Harry Shearer is 82. Susan Lucci is 79. Guitarist songwriter Anthony Phillips from Genesis is 74. Guitarist songwriter Dave Murray, Iron Maiden, is 69. Author Donna Tartt is 62. Singer-songwriter Eddie Vedder is 61. Model TV personality Holly Madison is 46. Actor-singer Anna Marie Perez de Tagle is 35. Actor Spencer Daniels is 33. Actor Reed Alexander is 31. Okay. Now let's find out what star-crossed genres do to pay tribute to honorees. Washington. Donald Trump traded the presidential box for center stage as he became the first president to host the Kennedy Center honors. After skipping all the ceremonies during his first term, the president brought his signature showmanship to the star-studded evening on Sunday, December 7th, honoring his, quote, very special friend, unquote, actor Sylvester Stallone, Broadway great Michael Crawford, the famed rockers of KISS, disco icon Gloria Gaynor, and the undisputed king of country music, George Strait, at the 48th Kennedy Center Awards. Trump alternated between lavishing praise on the attendees, boasting about the greatest night in the history of the Kennedy Center, throwing jabs at audience members, as well as former President Joe Biden, and quipping about renaming the venue for himself. The Trump Kennedy Center, I'm sorry, this is terribly embarrassing. The typically bipartisan affair was attended by many key figures in Trump's orbit, including fellow former TV personality Politico Dr. Mehmet Oz, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, House Speaker Mike Johnson, and Senior Advisor to the U.S. Agency for Global Media, Kari Lake. Legends of stage and screen, including a strong country music contingent, offered sung and spoken tributes to the honorees, including actors Kelsey Grammer and Kurt Russell, musicians Miranda Lambert, Cheap Trick, and Garth Brooks, and magician Chris Angel. The show, which will air on CBS and Paramount Plus on December 23rd at 8 p.m. Eastern, was capped off with an after-party in the Kennedy Center's Grand Foyer. You're listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 45 minutes past the hour. Stallone's legendary toughness. The night kicked off with a rousing rendition of Gonna Fly Now, aka the theme from Rocky, performed by musicians including legendary jazz trumpeter virtuoso Arturo Sandoval, a 2024 honoree who donned his rainbow stripes for the ceremony. Some of the Italian Stallions co-stars and his brother made the audience chuckle by doing an impression of Stallone's iconic gravelly voice. Russell, who co-starred with Stallone in the 1989 buddy cop film Tango and Cash, said Stallone's legendary toughness is underrated, as he recalled getting a love tap from the actor's star after executing a painful stunt. "I know you weren't born, you were forged," Russell joked. "This man literally is made of iron."
I don't see a Russell Jones in your contacts. Who do you want to call?
Sorry, my phone is listening from across the room, even though it's silent. Crazier things. In a video tribute that also featured some of Stallone's paintings, The Rambo star acknowledged the similarities between himself and some of the iconic characters he has played, saying that's part of what makes his television show, Tulsa King, so successful. I'm just playing me, Stallone said. Frank Stallone, who performed his song Take You Back from Rocky, got emotional as he described watching his brother's career after Rocky arrived at the theater where he once worked as an usher. To me, he'll always be my big brother, he said as Stallone wiped his eyes in the president's box. Though Grammer is perhaps best known as an actor, he started off his tribute to Broadway legend Michael Crawford, singing a few lines from Hello, Dolly, Crawford's breakout film. Grammer praised Crawford for his physical comedy skills, showcased in British sitcom Some Others Do album, and his powerful tenor voice that earned him a Tony Award for his role as the Phantom in Andrew Lloyd Webber's The Phantom of the Opera, a long-time favorite of Trump's. Yes, sir, you, sir, are truly where you belong, Grammer said. Your talent, discipline, your sheer commitment to excellence, traits that define your work, you have truly inspired generations of performers. Fellow Tony Award-winning Broadway star Laura Onez and singer David Phelps then belted out an alluring rendition of the Phantom title track in front of a theatrical backdrop, complete with red velvet drapes and a sparkling chandelier. Carrie Manolakis, best known for playing Sophie Sheridan in Mamma Mia on Broadway, also lent her soaring vocals to It Only Takes a Moment, performed by Crawford in Hello, Dolly. Before the event, Crawford told USA Today on the red carpet that he learned much about how to connect with audiences from watching Dolly director Gene Kelly sing and dance, as well as the comedy routines of silent film performers such as Buster Keaton and Harold Lloyd. That's a lesson that takes a lifetime, and I'm still learning, Crawford said. Every night is a new night. After a brief champagne-soaked intermission, country singer Vince Gill recalled sharing a stage with the king of country music for the first time more than 40 years ago, when George Strait was just the new kid. Despite his decades of success, Strait has stuck to his roots, offering a true and genuine view of country music, Gill said. With George, what you see is what you get, Gill said. You're a cowboy's cowboy, and you own authenticity, and that's why we call you the king. Strait, who accessorized with the cowboy hat, also reflected in his video tribute on how he went from playing in honky-tonks to making history, playing to a record-breaking 110,905 fans at Kyle Field in College Stadium, Texas, in 2024. Musical duo Brooks and Dunn sung the country crooners hit Amarillo by Morning, which presenters noted was inspired by a FedEx commercial. Gill returned to the stage to perform Troubadour, the title track from the album that won Strait his first Grammy. Fellow Texan Miranda Lambert drew some of the biggest cheers of the night when she performed Strait's song Run in front of a backdrop of rolling hills. Gloria Gaynor, the queen of disco. Who could follow the country music king except the queen of disco? The tempo of the evening picked up considerably when singer Elle King took the stage to perform Gloria Gaynor's iconic disco anthem, I Will Survive. King said Gaynor's voice conveys the story of strength and turning pain into power, proof of the truth of resilience of a woman. In her video message, Gaynor recounted the inspiration behind the empowering anthem, an onstage fall that temporarily left her paralyzed from the waist down and kept her in the hospital for 3 months. I was hoping I would survive this trauma that I was going through, hoping that I survived the fact that my mother had just passed away a few years prior, Gaynor said. I was living that song, and I was certain this song was going to do for my audience what it was doing for me at the moment. The crowd clapped and sang along as King and singer Denise Williams performed several of Gaynor's disco hits, surrounded by gilded backdrop dancers grooving beneath a giant glittering disco ball, all of which matched Gaynor's sparkly gown. The audience kept that same energy as Chris Blue, Jason Crabb, Mike Ferris, and Debbie Winans took the stage to perform a few triumphant tracks from Gaynor's gospel album, part of the second act that earned her another Grammy 40 years after she first won her Grammy. History in 6-inch heel boots. As a 2020 Kennedy Center honorees, Garth Brooks took the stage in cowboy hat, much like Straits. He jokingly reassured the audience he hadn't shown up for the wrong segment. He was there to honor the badass boys in the booth, legendary rockers Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, and Peter Criss of Kiss. Though they work in a vastly different genre, Brooks said, what unites all musicians is the courage to bare your soul in front of a crowd full of strangers. Now try that in 6-inch platform shoes, he joked. The band members recounted in a video tribute how they learned to connect with audiences. Though they eventually would take off the makeup, they'd continue to be soundtrack to their fans' lives for more than half a century. And the rest, they said, is history. The band, after Brooks performed a rendition of Shout It Loud that had the band bopping in the president's box, magician Chris Angel stepped out on the stage in a pair of those aforementioned platform boots worn by Stanley as the band's last show at Madison Square Garden. In one of the night's most emotional tributes, Angel said Kiss gave him the confidence to be himself and helped his son get through cancer treatment. Angel then led the crowd in a moment of remembrance, honoring spaceman Ace Frehley, the band's original lead guitarist who died in October. Beside him, a spotlight shined on a guitar that slowly became engulfed in smoke. Chris, the band's original drummer, could be seen wiping his eyes. We were extremely close, he and I. We lived near each other. His wife was the godmother to my daughter, Chris told USA Today before the show. He's missed, and there will never be another like him. He was an essential part of Kiss. I'm sorry. Christmas is on the next page. Sorry. He was an amazing musician, a very inventive guitarist. As the ceremony came to a close, fellow rockers Cheap Trick got the audience on its feet again with a rocking performance of Rock and Roll All Night as people in Kiss signature face paint danced in the aisles. You've been listening to a reading of the USA Today for today, the 23rd of December. We read the USA Today weekdays at noon. For more information, call us at 716-821-5555. Your reader for this hour has been Mikey. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have episode number 6 of You Belong Here by Megan Miranda. Following that, at 3 o'clock is National Geographic, and at 4 o'clock, a re-airing of this morning's Buffalo News. Stay with us.
Hello, this is Marian Heatherly, Community Engagement Coordinator for your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, and I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes as another year comes to a close. We've been reflecting on what we've accomplished in 2025 and what needs to be done in the new year, and you, our listeners, are at the heart of everything. One of our most important goals in 2026 is to sign up new listeners. More than 100,000 people across the Western New York, Greater Rochester, Southern Ontario region with vision loss, limited mobility, learning disabilities, or other reading challenges would benefit from our programming, but we only know a fraction of them because they're listening online. We love that you're using the service. Could you please take a moment now to let us know you're listening online by calling 716-821-5555 extension 5 and leaving a message. Or just send us a quick email to read@nfradioreading.org. It's very important for funding applications and other activities to have an accurate count of listeners. We'd also appreciate listeners' help spreading the word about radio reading. Our listeners are the best ambassadors of the service because you know us and use us. Do you belong to a group that would like radio reading to come speak? Please give us a call at 716-821-5555 extension 3. Do you have a friend or loved one who would benefit from radio reading? Please have them give us a call at 716-821-5555 extension 3. Do you live in a group home or senior living center where more people would benefit from radio reading? Please give us a call at 716-821-5555 extension 3. The most important message we want to share this holiday season is thank you to all of our listeners who have supported radio reading in 2025 by listening, by making a donation, by attending an event, by spreading the word about us, by connecting a new listener with us. You're incredibly important to us as we review our accomplishments of the past year and plan for the future, so we can keep our programming free for everyone who needs it.
The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low